Now, the House of Representatives on Thursday asked the Central Bank of Nigeria to withdraw the circular directing all banks to commence charging a 0.5% cybersecurity levy on all electronic transfers within the country. Now, the motion on the urgent need to halt and modify the implementation of the cybersecurity levy was moved by the member representing the Awabah constituency, Kingsley Chinda. The circular, which was directed all commercial merchants, non-interest and payment service banks, amongst others, noted that the implementation of the levy starts 2 weeks from Monday, that's May 6, 2024. On Tuesday, the Central Bank of Nigeria instructed banks in the country to implement the cybersecurity tax on levy on transaction.
Now, the initial directive had applied to commercial, merchant, non-interest and payment service banks, as well as other financial institutions, mobile money operators and payment service providers. Exempted from the levy include loan disbursements and repayments, salary payments, intra-account transfers within the same bank or between different banks for the same customer, intra-bank transfers between customers of the same bank. Also exempted from the levy were inter-branch transfers within a bank, check clearing and settlements, letters of credits, banks recapitalization-related funding, only bulk funds movement from collection accounts, savings and deposits, including transactions involving long-term investments, among others.
Now, in furtherance to the release by the CBN earlier in the week, the Nigerian Labour Congress rejected the newly introduced cybersecurity levy by the Central Bank of Nigeria, demanding its immediate withdrawal. In a statement by the President, Joe Ajero, the NLC lamented that the levy is another anti-people policy of the government amid economic hardship. According to the statement, the Nigerian Labour Congress vehemently condemned the directive by the CBN to that levy of a 0.5% cybersecurity levy. Now, the union adds that the levy to be implemented by the deduction at the transaction origination is yet another burden on the shoulders of hardworking Nigerians.
And now to discuss the details of this and the implications of the levy, we're going to be joined in the studio first by Tunji Andrews. He's the CEO, Awabah, and financial expert. And also joining us via video chat is Dr. Etim Okon. He's the first deputy president, TUC. A very good morning to you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for coming on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
First off, let me direct this to Dr. Okon. Yes, sir. Dr. Okon, I wanted to say congratulations because this is a win for the TUC and the NLC, isn't it?
Well, it's not yet a huru. I know even when the National Assembly have directed that the central bank should stop forthwith, we have also issued ultimatum for them to stop forthwith. So we are waiting to see the directive comment very clearly that has to be stopped, not the one, that clandestinely, and undercurrent by directing the banks to do otherwise.
Right. Let me come to you, Tunji. We understand that, this has now been recalled so that they can look at the legalities of this. But how necessary is the cybersecurity levy?
Very necessary. The only thing I think that is a point of contest in this entire conversation is the actual amount. That we need a cybersecurity fund is without question. We all see what's happening with, fraudsters, people being hacked and things like that, especially in the fact that, when you want to compare with the rest of the world, what happens, you watch movies and you see somebody just hacks into one particular account. A few weeks ago or a few days ago, we heard about the conversation with the UK and China, where the UK was making allegations about China hacking into their system. So we do need this law. We do need the funds to be able to protect our cyberspace. But at 0.5%, it's pretty steep.
Very interesting question everybody's asking. Exactly how would this have been implemented? Is this supposed to be some sort of apparatus or a setup of sorts? And how come that the customer has to be the one paying?
I don't think a lot of thought was put into that, because if you look at it from a blanket statement, we had maybe about 300 trillion in terms of transactions last year. If you were going to put that into 0.5%, that is something sizable. That money could be put into infrastructure and the rest. The fact that if I send you money, maybe I was owing you 10K and I was going to send it back to you, that means I'll have to put 0.5% on top of that, which just doesn't make any sense. Which, for instance, if I was to send it to you and you were to send it to somebody else, that means it's 0.5%, another 0.5%. So I don't think they thought it through properly, but the idea was that it was going to go through to the NFIU for national security and the cyberspace, and then being implemented into creating architecture to protect our cyberspace, banking and the rest. Also, there was talk about trying to train more cybersecurity experts in the country. I hear we only have about 10,000 of them, less than 10,000 of them altogether, which is really a little too small. But the conversation really is, do we need it? Yes. I just think we just need to understand why they picked 0.5% of all the figures they could have picked.
Dr. Okon, let me come to you and ask, you are a representative of TUC, and we've seen that the NLC and the TUC have, consistently, they're against this levy altogether, and one of their concerns is the heavy taxation of it, right? But how do they intend to balance the interest of consumers, and in this case, Nigerian workers, and just the everyday Nigerian, in terms of interests of these two different, unions against, the government in ensuring that everyone is, their needs are being met at the table?
Well, let me say this. Sometimes the government may see policy as being very good with a good intention, but you look at the timing of implementation, you must understand that you must also look at the mood. Yes, cybersecurity will have fantastic, but when you look at the heavy taxation, and you also look at what government have put so far in terms of addressing the real security situation in Nigeria, that has not yielded any meaningful result. And you look at the burden on the workers, you look at the burden on the masses, you look at the socioeconomic challenges. Government was not voted to impoverish the masses. It was voted to think a way out to solve problem, and Nigerian problem cannot be solved overnight. I think the bottom line is that you cannot even grow Nigerian economy with taxation. You have to grow Nigerian economy with productive venture. People talk about infrastructure, and yet we are still having the challenges. Let us not hide under any pretense to say that so much money will be generated and so much we look at infrastructure and so we look at the cyber security, yes, and we look at what happened even to the normal security situation. They have rejig and over-rejig the security architecture in this country. What are we getting? What are we getting? I think the bottom line is to see how government can think of, think outside the box to know that Nigerian problem need to be solved. If you solve all these problems we are looking at now, and the people still live in abject poverty, you remove fuel subsidy today, we are still seeing fuel queue. You removed electricity tariff and no lights. These are issues, and you are coming again to tell us on cybersecurity levy. I mean, it is unspeakable. It's attempts to really bring down the country, honestly, because it's a strong recipe for industrial unrest. I've never seen the level of taxation since the inception of this government. And that's why we are saying enough is enough. You may have good intention, but you don't think of the well-being of your citizenry. It's wrong. It's wrong. Nobody is condemning the act, but then you are implementing it in a very wrong timing.
Thank you very much.
That is our concern. The tax burden on the workers, on the masses, on Nigeria, you are taxing the poor.
Okay, Doctor.
Then the banking public will not want to go to banking again. you are also going to make people to hoard money where they're supposed to bank. You can see what has happened to the dollars, where people were hoarding it, and how skyrocketed it is. So you want Naira to also suffer the same fate, where there is no even money in the economy. People are suffering, and you are bringing burden on the people simply because they go to bank and make transactions. It is not acceptable, and we will reject it in totality.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor. Let me come to Tunji Andrews here in the studio with us. Tunji, so Nigeria lives, breathes, eats through transactions currently. Now, my question now is it possible for the banks to actually shoulder this responsibility, perhaps take this cost if it was to be implemented? Thankfully, it has been paused currently, but if it was to be implemented, is it possible for the banks to shoulder this cost?
In the current format, no. 0.5%. Why would the banks carry that extra burden? I do know that there has, or at least there has been conversations or talks about a funding of some sort of cybersecurity apparatus, which the banks have been funding themselves. And the banks have been doing a bit. But this is not a thing that, one, originated from the CBN. Neither did it originate from the banks. It originated from the National Assembly in terms of what the apparatus or the framework is supposed to be and how much you're supposed to pay. So the banks really have not even had a conversation in this matter. They've just been said, you should do this, and they're like, okay, exactly. They've been directed to do it. So I don't think the banks have a conversation yet in the entire matter. The conversation also is that the Act itself was first originated in 2015, an amendment this year, which then imputed that 0.5. So the conversation had been going on for maybe about 9-10 years, but somebody or some group of people in this year decided what that 0.5 should be. I think it would make a little bit more sense if it was 0.5% of the fees. So you probably transfer maybe 50,000 naira, then you get 125 naira, and then you get a 5 naira. But I wouldn't. I think it would be a bit more. It would make a lot more sense if it was maybe 0.5% of that 25 naira, rather than 0.5% of the entire figure. That means if I send you $1 million naira, I have to pay 5,000 naira extra. It just doesn't make any sense, So I think the banks would have a conversation if they were even brought into the picture to begin with.
All right. Doctor, let me come to you and ask this question that we did to Tunji, but I'm going to twist it on his head. Do you think that the government should also bear the cost, away from the banks? The government, can they factor something that can sort of alleviate or cushion it? I know that we're so used to subsidies, but can they be subsidized in this situation, given all that has happened in the last, 11, 10 months with our economy? Dr. Okon, are you there?
I didn't get the question right, but... So
when Mazzino asked a question to Tunji, he was asking whether or not, the banks should bear the cost. Yes.
So there's no way you think that you cannot subsidize for the citizens. No government, can smoothly operate without subsidizing some few things for the citizen. No, it can't be in total. You can see what has happened to the fuel subsidy removal. Now Nigeria has not come out to tell us that they are still subsidizing fuel, but they are hiding under the umbrella of logistics. And that is why they are still telling us that they are still paying for landing costs and they are still owing marketers. These are issues. You cannot. There's no economy that survives without subsidy. So whether they like it or not, they have to think back. And any policy you want to implement, without a clear-cut work plan cannot strive. What we are saying, I appreciate what the gentleman in the studio have said. The amounts, so decided 0.5 is heavy. And if bank is charging administrative charges, tax and other charges in the bank, and they cannot bear this, the bank themselves know that it is not wise to leave this burden on the customers. And any attempts to do that, you are discouraging banking, which is not healthy for the economy. because heavy taxation will drive investors away from the economy that is already shaking. So why are you bringing a lot of taxation at this point in time when you want to get the country out of the wood? So these are issues. I didn't get the question right, but I address it in this context.
Right. Doctor, thank you so much for that. And which you nicely put this about the banks, right? Very recently, the House of Reps made a move when DSTV and others subscribing, especially DSTV, when they increased their subscriptions for subscribers, the rep moved to pause on payment of that new tariff. But DSTV went on with that price, imposing that the subscribers and customers must pay that. Do you see a scenario where the banks will still move with that? Because, I mean, Tunji just said that tackling cybersecurity is very heavy. There's not enough personnel to do that, and it's a very heavy cumbersome on the banks as well. Do you see that the banks still moving with the directive in doing that, in imposing the tax?
If you recall the first question where you congratulated me, I said it's not yet a huru. It's not yet a huru because we don't want to wake up and see a situation where the implementation is done on that table and you only wake up to know that it has been effected. But let me also warn here, Nigerian government knows the implication and go ahead with that, and also the banking sector knows the implication. I want to believe that we are operating a country where there are rule of law, and I want to believe that we are also running a government where, if it is truly democracy, the voice of the masses have to be heard. And I believe that the president, as a listening president, must know that going ahead to implement this will be counterproductive to the economy, and the workers will not be able to contain the pressure that will come on this. So the better they step down and withdraw that circular, I think the good for all of us, because the country belongs to us, and in democracy, the voices of the masses have to be heard. So no sense.
Okay,
Bank, we want to go ahead. At an appropriate time, we'll respond, and we know the language they want to hear. I can assure you that when we respond, they will,
Okay then. Thank you very much, Doctor. Tunji, let me come to you now. The Naira is doing badly. It was doing great 2 weeks ago, but now it's like the worst performing currency. 2 weeks ago it was good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now it's the worst performing currency out there. Does it seem like the Nigerian government is actually turning to a different cash cow now, and the cash cow is actually the citizens? Is that what's happening? You're an economist, so you can answer that. Fair opinion.
Cash cow.
To be honest, I don't think so. I think from what we hear from the government, especially the person who sits on harmonizing taxation in Nigeria, they are looking to try and reduce taxes as much as possible. What we have is multiple taxation, and that's why it looks like it's heavy. You get taxed at the federal level, you get taxed at the state level, you get taxed at the local government level.
Get taxed in my pocket because I'm
You know what I mean?
transacting.
It's multiple conversations, and I think what they're trying to do is harmonize it. But at the same time, there's also every single entity is trying to bring out the taxes that they should be collecting so that it is factored into that harmonized conversation. I don't think the government is trying to overburden the people. I think the government, in its own wisdom, feels there are things that it needs to do to try and raise capital. It's, however, doing it in a slightly insensitive way. So it then turns like it is trying to kill the people. But I think they're doing what they should do, but they should do it with a bit more engagement and conversation.
I don't know, Judith, is it me or does he sound empathetic to the government? I don't know.
But you've always known that I'm slightly capitalist in the way I think about
you are
things.
capitalist, it's true. And there's one thing as well that one needs to also put this into perspective. I remember I saw a headline where the IMF was calling Nigerians, saying that the contributions of our taxation to our GDP is still very low, and it needs to be increased as well. I mean, but an argument, it's one of the arguments that can be made is that there's no transparency of that,
Absolutely.
right? So there's heavy taxation. We're seeing the taxation happen in different levels, but there's no transparency as to where the coffers are and where the number is. So there's also that needs to be a conversation about our transparency on our tax process needs to be had.
I have one final question for Dr. Okon. Doctor, now, in recent or in past experiences, we've always had a situation where there's always a compromise met. If the government says pay 100 naira, the TUC and the NLC come in and say, no, we're not paying it. And then eventually they say, okay, you guys should pay 25 naira. And then eventually we start paying 25 naira. In this instance, if that was to happen, where is the compromise? At what value would the NLC and TUC say, okay, Nigerians pay that levy? Would there be such?
Let me thank the man in the studio because he has said it all. Any policy you introduce without stakeholder engagement must bounce back. You know, I believe that the country is growing, yes, but you know, you cannot impose taxation on us. And we believe that as organized labor, we should have that conversation and come to agreement. You know, and mind you, we should also look at the timing. Because timing is of essence. You cannot, you know, continue to tax, you know, the masses, and we feel that we can just come and then have an agreement because you've called us and then discuss with us on the way without, then we will now come and tell you, yes, XYZ is acceptable. No, we have to look at the nitty-gritty and also look at, you know, what has done so far. Don't forget, because we have had a lot of trust deficit, you know, even with the past government, even with this government. Because when we had an agreement in October 2, we expected that by now the CNG buses will have been on the streets of Abuja, Lagos, and everywhere to bring succor on transportation. But 1 year is going, nothing is done. So that trust deficit is there. Don't also forget that we have 35,000 naira which we have agreed to be paid till the minimum wage comes to effect. As we speak, they stopped since February. They have not paid March, they have not paid April. That trust deficit is there.
All
so
right,
there's
Doctor.
no way they will come out with any other discuss to tell us that XYZ should be acceptable by us, and we had a conversation and we agree on that. Because once bitten, twice shy. This is something that is very critical, and right, we feel that the government should walk the talk and live by the words, because it is surprising that government will introduce policies and then at the end invite the organized labor. What do you want us to do when we have not
Doctor,
been
I want to say
throughout the process
thank you,
of
sir.
your policy formulation?
Thank you very much, Doctor.
You have not involved us. Why are you involving us in 11 hours? Because we issued trade notice.
All heard, sir. We are out of time, unfortunately, sir. But I want to say thank you very much for actually joining us this morning outside your busy schedule. We appreciate that very much, sir. Thank you. And of course, thank you very much, Tunji Andrews, for joining us.